There was a smell. That's always where it starts. Isn't it a smell? Bacon fat on a griddle that hadn't been properly scraped since the previous Tuesday. Cheap cooking oil gone dark and slightly acrid from 1,000 previous fry-up. Tea so strong and so endlessly brewed that the tannin had stained the inside of every pot and every cup, a deep tobacco brown that no amount of washing would ever shift. And underneath all of that, underneath the grease and the steam and the slightly damp coats of the men who'd come in off the street, there was something else. Something you don't get a word for until it's gone. The smell of somewhere that knew you. That expected you. That had your tea on the counter before you'd even sat down properly. That was the Greasy Spoon Café. And before a single golden arch appeared on a single British high street, that was where working-class Britain ate its breakfast, warmed its hands, and held itself together. We talk now about community as though it were something you need to build, something that requires investment and planning and a council committee. But it wasn't built in the Greasy Spoon. It was simply there. The same way the condensation on the window was there. The same way the wobbly table leg was there. The same way Brenda was there, always Brenda, or Pat, or Vera, or some variation of a woman who had been on her feet since 5:30 in the morning and who called every single person who walked through that door love, regardless of whether she knew them or not, regardless of whether they were a lorry driver or a binman or a school kid bunking off for the morning. Love. One syllable. No performance in it whatsoever, just the basic, unthinking acknowledgement that you were a human being who deserved a hot drink and a seat. These cafes were not glamorous. Let's not dress this up. The floors were lino, often cracked along the edges where it met the skirting board. The tables were formica, that particular shade of speckled cream and gray that seemed to exist nowhere else in the universe except greasy spoon cafes and 1970s hospital waiting rooms. The chairs were mismatched, because a chair was a chair, and if it held your weight without complaint, then it had earned its place. The walls were sometimes tiled in those small brown and orange ceramic squares that somehow became the universal shorthand for functional kitchen space in every British town from Plymouth to Preston. There was usually a hand-painted or chalk-written menu board, slightly lopsided, the lettering done by someone who had practicality in mind and calligraphy very firmly out of it. And the prices. In 1971, the year Britain went decimal, the year everything got slightly more confusing and slightly more expensive, all at once a full English breakfast at a standard working-class cafe would have cost you somewhere between 20p and 30p. By the mid-1970s, with inflation beginning to bite with genuine savagery, that same plate had crept up towards 35p to 45p. By 1979, the year Thatcher came in, the year everything started shifting beneath people's feet. You were looking at perhaps 55p to 65p for the full work. Bacon, 2 eggs, sausage, beans, fried bread, tomato, and toast. That was the plate. That was what a man needed to get through a physical working day, and that was what it cost. Not cheap, not for someone on a manual worker's wage in 1975, but within reach. Always within reach. That was the point. The tea mattered as much as the food, possibly more. It came in those thick white mugs, not cups. Mugs, and it was strong enough to stand a spoon in, brewed in great silver urns that sat steaming behind the counter from the moment the cafe opened to the moment it shut. This was not the delicate, pale, apologetic tea of the office canteen. This was builder's tea, docker's tea, the tea of people who needed the caffeine to hit fast and the warmth to spread outward from the chest in a way that made the prospect of 6 hours in the cold or the wet or the noise slightly less impossible. It came with milk already and no asking, no choices, no ceremony, and if you were lucky, a saucer underneath, even though the saucer had clearly once belonged to an entirely different cup from an entirely different era. You could sit there for as long as you needed. That was another thing. Nobody was moving you on. Nobody was monitoring how long your cup had been empty or clearing your table with that particular aggressive efficiency that tells you, without any words at all, that your welcome has expired. The Greasy Spoon operated on a different understanding of time and space. You paid for your meal. The table was yours for as long as you were in it. If you wanted another cup of tea, you asked Brenda, and Brenda brought it. If you sat nursing a single mug for 45 minutes because you were waiting out the rain, or because you had nowhere better to be, or because you just had a row with your wife and needed 10 minutes of warm quiet before going back, that was fine. That was understood. No judgment, no hovering. The full English breakfast itself deserves more than a passing mention, because it was not merely a meal, it was a ritual. and a statement, and in its own way, a small daily act of defiance against the grayness of things. The sausages were not artisanal. They were not Cumberland or Lincolnshire or anything that came with a description. They were cheap pork sausages, probably from a catering supplier's box, and they were cooked on a flat griddle until the skins were split and slightly charred in places, and the fat ran free and golden. The bacon was back bacon, usually cut thick, the rind often still on, crisped up to the point where it would shatter if you folded it. The eggs were fried in the grease that everything else had been cooked in, so the whites had those lacy, slightly brown, slightly crispy edges that you simply cannot replicate on a clean, non-stick pan with a measured drizzle of olive oil. You cannot. The physics of it are wrong. The eggs tasted of everything that had been cooked before them, and that was not a flaw, that was entirely the point. The fried bread was an institution that has now been effectively erased from British food culture by a combination of nutritional awareness and the disappearance of the places that made it. It was bread, white bread, sliced, the cheap supermarket kind or the equivalent from the baker down the road, fried in the same fat until it was golden and rigid and dense, and so utterly saturated that it left a small oil mark on whatever surface you rested it on. It had no nutritional defense. None was offered. It tasted extraordinary. The combination of the crunch of the outer surface and the way the inside had gone soft and pillowy and rich, there was nothing like it. And there still isn't, because nothing produced in a commercial kitchen with regulated cooking temperatures and standardized procedures has ever managed to replicate what happened in those little kitchens by accident and repetition and complete indifference to dietary guidelines. Baked beans came from a tin, Heinz. Most likely this was non-negotiable in most corners of Britain, heated in a small saucepan on the back ring, and poured over or beside the plate in a quantity that was generous to the point of being slightly problematic for the structural integrity of the toast. The tomatoes were usually tinned as well, though some cafes used fresh halved tomatoes grilled until the skin blistered and the inside collapsed into something jammy and intensely sweet against the salt of everything else on the plate. Toast was almost always a little too cold by the time it arrived, slightly soggy on the bottom from proximity to the beans, and buttered with a thoroughness that suggested butter was still regarded as a privilege rather than a health hazard, which, in the context of British post-war food culture, it more or less was for the generation who had grown up with rationing. Now the people who ran these places. That's a history worth spending some time in, because it's a history that's been almost entirely forgotten. The classic Greasy spoon was almost never a chain. It was almost never a franchise, a brand, or an investment vehicle. It was a family business, usually started by a single person, often a woman, often someone who had no formal training in catering but who could cook, who worked hard, and who had enough capital to take on a lease on a small ground-floor unit on a secondary high street, or near a market or beside a bus depot or a factory gate. The startup costs were low because the equipment was minimal: a griddle, a deep fat fryer, an urn, a fridge, a few tables, and the willingness to start before dawn every morning. The woman behind the counter, and it was, statistically, more often a woman, though plenty of men ran them too, was rarely just a cook. She was a social worker without the qualification, a counselor without the training, a one-woman welfare system operating on instinct and mug tea. She knew who was going through a rough patch and who needed the food more than they could afford it, and she sorted it out quietly and without making anyone feel small about it. She knew who drank too much and she'd water the tea a bit and have a quiet word. She knew whose marriage was in trouble, whose kids were struggling at school, whose boss was giving them grief. She remembered orders, not because she was impressive, because she just paid attention, the same way you pay attention to people whose lives you are briefly but genuinely part of. What did we talk about in those places? Everything. Nothing. The football, always the football, dissected with the kind of passionate analytical rigor that would embarrass a professional pundit. The news, or rather the version of the news that had been filtered through a tabloid and then through 6 different working-class interpretations before it reached the cafe table. The state of the roads, the state of the country, the specific personal failings of whoever was currently in charge of anything. The price of things. Always the price of things, because the price of things mattered when you were watching every penny, and the gap between getting through the week and not getting through the week was narrower than anyone who'd never lived it could properly understand. In the winter, and the winters in the Britain of the 1970s were winters in a way that modern ones, for all their problems, often or not the Greasy Spoon was one of the few places that was reliably, genuinely warm. The winter of 1962 to 1963 remains the coldest in Britain since 1740, with temperatures in some parts of England falling below -20°C, and the ground frozen so hard that gravediggers could not break it. But even in the more ordinary misery of a wet November in 1974, or a gray January in 1977, the cold got into you in a way that it doesn't quite now, partly because the houses were colder, the single-glazed windows running with condensation every morning, the council estate flats where the heating either didn't work or cost more to run than people could afford, the bus stops with no shelter and the buses that came when they felt like it. You arrived at the cafe cold in your bones, not just on your skin, and the warmth of that room, the steam, the cooking smells, the human density of it did something that went beyond physical temperature regulation. It reached somewhere deeper than that. What was your favorite thing on that plate back then? Was it the fried bread, or the way the egg yolk ran into everything else when you broke it? Let me know down in the comments, because I swear there's a whole generation of us who haven't tasted anything like it since the last of these places shut their doors, and nobody who's never had it can quite understand what we're on about. By the mid-1980s, the Greasy Spoon was already beginning to feel pressure from forces it hadn't been designed to withstand. The first McDonald's had opened in the UK in Woolwich in 1974, a single restaurant, curiosity more than threat at that stage, but by the early 1980s the chain had begun its rapid expansion across British town centres, and it was bringing with it something that the Greasy Spoon simply could not compete with on its own terms. It was bringing consistency. Every McDonald's in every town served the same thing at the same price, with the same packaging in the same amount of time. There was no variability. No Brenda who was having a bad day. No slightly different version of the sausages depending on who the supplier was that week. No waiting 10 minutes because the griddle was busy. You knew exactly what you were getting. And in an increasingly uncertain world, that had an appeal particularly to younger people, particularly to families with children who had seen the American model on television and wanted a piece of it. The economics of what was happening were brutal and specific. Business rates, the property tax levied on commercial premises, had been rising steadily through the 1970s and accelerated significantly after the Local Government Finance Act of 1988 introduced the unified business rate, which meant that rates were no longer set locally but nationally. And for many small businesses in town centers, the resulting bills were sharply higher than they had been under the old system. A small cafe owner who had been just managing, month to month, with no fat to spare, suddenly found herself facing a rates bill that had increased by 30 or 40%, with no corresponding increase in what she could charge for a bacon sandwich without losing the custom that kept her viable. The margins in a Greasy Spoon were never wide. They were always dependent on volume and on keeping costs as low as physically possible. There was no room to absorb a sudden structural increase in fixed costs. The food hygiene legislation is a chapter of this story that is complicated because the regulations themselves were not wrong. The Food Safety Act of 1990 was the most significant overhaul of food safety law in Britain since the Victorian era, and much of what it required: proper refrigeration temperatures, separation of raw and cooked products, staff training on basic hygiene, documented cleaning procedures, was entirely reasonable and long overdue. Nobody serious argues that the pre-1990 Greasy Spoon operated under conditions that would be acceptable today. Some of them were fine. Some of them were on the wrong side of acceptable. The issue was not the regulations themselves, but the cost of compliance for tiny operations running on essentially no capital reserve. To meet the new requirements, many cafe owners needed to upgrade or replace their kitchen equipment, refrigeration units that were technically compliant, new surfaces that could be properly cleaned and documented. In some cases, structural work improved ventilation, changes to drainage, separation of preparation areas. A small cafe with a kitchen the size of a large bathroom, operating on margins of perhaps a few £100 profit per week, faced capital expenditure that could run into several £1,000s, money they simply did not have and could not borrow against premises they didn't own. The local council environmental health officer would come round with a clipboard and a list, and if you failed the inspection, you had a limited time to comply or face being shut down. Some did comply, many couldn't. The ones who couldn't closed. And then there was the supermarket. This is the piece of the story that doesn't get told as dramatically as the McDonald's chapter, but it may have been equally significant. Throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s, the major British supermarket chains were aggressively expanding, not just in terms of store numbers, but in terms of what they offered. By the late 1980s, a working family could buy a week's worth of groceries, including the components for a full English breakfast from Tesco or Sainsbury's at prices that made eating out, even at the modest prices of a greasy spoon, look comparatively expensive. Bacon, eggs, sausages, bread, beans, the raw ingredients cost less per serving when bought in a supermarket packet than the prepared meal cost in a cafe. The supermarket had economies of scale that no single small operator could touch. It was buying in volumes that drove the wholesale price of everything down to levels that made the greasy spoon's purchasing costs look inefficient by comparison. The high streets themselves were changing in ways that starved the greasy spoon of its natural customer base. The factories were closing, the textile mills, the steel works, the light engineering plants that had ringed British towns and sustained their local economies and their local cafe trade for generations. The docks were emptying, the mines were shutting, dramatically and traumatically through the mid-1980s following the miners' strike of 1984 to 1985, and the communities that the pits had sustained, communities where every man started work before dawn and needed a hot meal before he went underground, simply ceased to exist in the form they had taken for over a century. There were no more shifts ending at 6:30 in the morning. There were no more gangs of workers walking down the same street to the same place at the same time. The rhythm of working-class industrial life that had made the greasy spoon necessary, that had made it inevitable, was broken. And you cannot run a cafe on nostalgia. You need customers who are hungry at the times you are open. The statistics are stark and largely unremarked upon in mainstream cultural history. In 1980, there were estimated to be somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 independent transport cafes, workers' cafes, and greasy spoon-style establishments across England, Wales, and Scotland. By 2010, that number had fallen by somewhere between 75 and 80%. Some estimates put the decline even higher in certain urban areas. The ones that survived tended to do so in very specific locations near motorway service areas that the large chains hadn't yet conquered. In market towns where the tradition was deeply embedded, in parts of London where gentrification hadn't yet arrived to replace them with artisan brunch establishments serving 12-pound avocado toast on sourdough to people who talked about mindfulness. The ones that disappeared took with them something that had no direct economic value and therefore no obvious advocate. There was no lobby group for the greasy spoon. There was no preservation society, no heritage listing, no campaign with a celebrity chef attached to it. The people who used them were not the people whose losses tend to generate column inches. When the last Formica table went into a skip and the last urn was sold off at auction, and the hand-painted menu board was taken down from the wall, and the premises were refit for a mobile phone shop or a vaping outlet or a branch of a national sandwich chain, nobody held a press conference. Nobody marked it. It just happened, again and again, across every high street in every town in Britain, until a whole world was gone. There is a particular kind of grief that attaches itself to places rather than people, to buildings and rooms and specific arrangements of furniture and light that held your life at a certain moment and then were taken away before you'd had a chance to understand how much they mattered. The greasy spoon was that kind of place for an entire class of people, and the grief for it is real, even if it is rarely named as grief. It is the feeling of driving through a town you grew up in and seeing that the cafe on the corner, the one you went to with your dad on Saturday mornings, the one that smelled of bacon and tea and wet wool, is now a letting agent's office with frosted glass and aspirational photography in the window. It is the feeling of ordering a coffee in a branded chain and watching it be produced by a machine in 45 seconds, and knowing, with absolute certainty, that no transaction has taken place, not the real kind, not the kind where one human being acknowledges another. We were told that what replaced these places was better, more hygienic, more consistent, more efficient. And perhaps, by certain measurable criteria, that is true. You won't get a dodgy sausage at a franchise. The refrigeration is definitely up to standard. The paperwork is impeccable. But the bargain that was struck, the thing we gave up in exchange for all that clean consistency, was the certainty of being known. The certainty that somewhere, on a cold morning, on a difficult day, there was a warm room and a thick mug of tea, and a woman who called you love and meant it without thinking about it. That's gone now. Most of it, anyway. And the places that replaced it have never once, not for a single second, even tried.